From our 22 News Broadcast Center, this is 22 News in Focus. Today, Decision 2013, a debate with the candidates for the Massachusetts Senate in the 2nd Hamden, Hampshire District. Here's Laura Hutchinson.
Sunday afternoon, and welcome to a special 22 News in Focus. I'm Laura Hutchinson. We have a very special split edition of 22 News in Focus for you today. During the second half hour of our program, we'll talk about Mohegan Sun's casino proposal in Palmer. Voters there will decide on November 5th if they want a casino in their community. And we'll hear today why people like the proposal and what concerns others have. But first, we begin today with the debate between the two candidates for state senate left vacant by Mike Knappich in the 2nd Hamden and Hampshire District. We have with us today Democrat David Bartley and his challenger, Republican Don Humison. Today's debate will be a Lincoln Douglas format, meaning the candidates will ask each other questions. The candidates will have 30 seconds to ask a question, 60 seconds to respond, then there will be time for a 30-second rebuttal. We will begin with opening statements today. Each candidate has a minute. We conducted a drawing before today's taping and found Mr. Humison will start us off. Don, you have 1 minute.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Laura. Thank you, everybody, for watching. And David, thanks for the opportunity to debate today. My name is Representative Don Humison. I'm the state representative for the city of Westfield, and I'm running for state senate. If you live in any of the 11 cities and towns in this district, I hope you'll consider voting for me on November 5th. If you live in Agawam or Southwick, Granville or Talent, East Hampton, Southampton, Russell, Montgomery, Chicopee, Holyoke, or Westfield, I hope you'll vote for me. I've practiced that a lot, so I hope I did a good job. A little bit about myself. I'm a family man. I have a wife named Janice and a 2-year-old boy named Quinn. Family is very important to me, and that's part of the reason why I'm running. We met at Westfield State College back in the 80s. I'm a graduate of Westfield State University and have a degree in criminal justice with a minor in psychology and Spanish. Public service is in my blood. My father is a firefighter, my mother is a nurse, and public service is very, very important to me, and that's why I'm running for Senate. Most of all, I have the experience, I think, to give back to this district. After 11 years in the House of Representatives and another 9 years working for Mike Knappich, that experience counts.
Okay, Mr. Bartley, you have 1 minute.
Thank you, Laura, and good afternoon, everyone, and good afternoon to my honorable friend and opponent, Rep. Don Humison. And good afternoon to all of you, and thank you for watching. It was said a while ago by Speaker of the House, Tip O'Neill, that all politics is local. That was a famous comment. Let me make a little change in that. Great government, when it's an effective government, that is local. Your state, your city councilors, your school committee persons, your select board members, your mayors, they're the ones that know government. They know you. When resources are directed to the local level, they know what's best, how best to work for our economy and how to support you, support the concerns that you have. That's what my campaigns have been about. Directing resources from Boston to Western Mass, where the local leaders know best what to do with them, and how you can tell us as local leaders how we can effectively help yourselves. I ask for your support November 5th, and I look forward to a great debate with my friend Don Humison.
Okay, and we move on now to the question and answer portion of today's debate. Again, the candidates will be asking each other questions. We did conduct a drawing and determined Mr. Humison will be asking the first question.
Thank you. You know, in my 11 years as a state representative in Westfield, I've had the opportunity to serve on a number of important legislative committees that impact work out here in Western Massachusetts, like transportation, higher education, and the like. I just got some good news that the Senate Minority Leader said he will appoint me to the Ways and Means Committee. So I'm very excited about that opportunity to serve. David, if you have the opportunity, which committees would you be interested in serving on, and what have you been promised?
I appreciate that question. And so I'm not looking forward exactly to what committees I'm going to be on, and I'm glad that the Minority Leader said you're going to be on Ways and Means, but that's a little presumptuous. I'm here to ask folks for their vote and for their support on November 5th. And before I get to any committees or any committee assignments, and I haven't been promised anything, the only promise I'm making is that I'm going to work hard for Western Mass, hard to bring those tax dollars that we so desperately need here in one of the poorest Senate districts in the Commonwealth, bring those tax dollars back. So instead of self-aggrandizement that I'll be on a Ways and Means Committee, let's put that nonsense to the side until after the election. Let's talk about the things that are important to Western Mass, your concerns. Whether I get on a committee that's of my choice, that's of no import. It's the committees that you want me to be on, the ones where I can best effectively serve you as a state senator, and then we'll talk about committees later on.
Mr. Humison, it's your rebuttal.
Thank you. Well, no rebuttal really necessary other than to say I'm very pleased with the opportunity that has been afforded to me. If the people of this district elect me as their next state senator, I will have the opportunity to follow where Mike Knappich led. And as Senator Knappich showed, that being on that Ways and Means Committee, he was able to do a lot of good here for Western Massachusetts. And I appreciate that opportunity as a long-term legislator to do good for our district. Thank you.
Mr. Bartley, your question.
Thank you, Laura. My friend Don Humison, I've made the center of my campaign bringing local aid back from Boston, back to Western Mass when we need it. And so I've discussed countless times, and I'm happy to tell the viewers here at Channel 22 that local aid has been pummeled. Meanwhile, the state budget has risen 30%, $34 billion. Rep. Humison, how are you going to help bring local aid back to Western Mass?
Thank you, David. An excellent question. You know, in the state legislature, the budget is $34 billion of your taxpayer dollars. And we have to divvy that large pie up and send it back to the Commonwealth all across the state. Local aid has always been a personal priority of mine because that's the money that comes from the taxpayers to Boston and then back to cities and towns. Unfortunately for your position, David, it's often the legislative leadership that controls where budget dollars go, and local aid hasn't seemed to be a huge priority among the policy leaders in Boston. And my caucus and I have pushed repeatedly for an early resolution for local aid so that our mayors and city councilors, our selectmen, know early on how much money they're going to be receiving. That amendment that we file or that bill that we craft every year is always shot down by the leadership. I'm not sure what their problem with local aid is, but like you, I agree it's very, very important, and I've made a career of trying to fight for more local aid and better information to our local leaders about that.
Okay, Mr. Bartley.
Thank you, Mr. Humison. The better answer, I think, and I respect Mr. Humison's opinion, the better answer is to look specifically is what are the formulas? So let me throw this out as a suggestion. We are the second poorest Senate district in the Commonwealth. Shouldn't that count? We need local aid. Let's also look at how we have all this public housing in Western Massachusetts. We have more than our share. Shouldn't that count as well? So let's change the formula. Let's change the thinking in Boston. We can do that.
Mr. Humison, it's your question.
Thank you, Laura. As a state representative over the years, I've had the opportunity to file legislation to promote economic advancement here for our district, to also help with roads and bridges in my district, file sick leave banks for constituents who need help. As a lawmaker, it's about the bills you file and the bills that you oppose that really makes your career. What legislation do you think that you'll file when you get to the state Senate, if you have the opportunity to do so?
Thank you, Don. So it's great to sit down in Boston for 12 years, 11 and a half years, and file legislation, although Don really doesn't have much of a track record of filing legislation. And respectfully, I say, he doesn't have much of a track record of having any legislation passed into law. There is virtually nil when that comes. So I think one of my focuses is local aid. That's the key focus. So if we can change how the formulas are derived, then I'm confident that when we file legislation to do that, when we explain to folks in Boston how important it is that local aid can help us lower property taxes, improve our quality of life, support firefighters, support police officers, support teachers. That's what we want to do. That's where I'm going to focus my energy, all my intention as a state senator.
Mr. Humison, your rebuttal.
David, I'm disappointed. That response was a bit beneath you to attack my record after 11 years. You know, there are a lot of things in Westfield that I've done and a lot of things I've gotten past, not just by myself, but working with my colleagues on both sides of the aisle, the Democrats and the Republicans. You only have to get out of Holyoke for a little while and drive through Westfield to see the new bridges that we have, the viaduct for the railway, the parks and the wide roads, the new businesses. Gulfstream has located at Barnes Airport because of the work that I've done, not by myself, but with my colleagues. So I invite you to come down in Westfield, to Westfield and see what we've done.
Mr. Bartley, your question.
The question was about legislation, and Don's passed none, but the record can speak for itself. I just talked. My prior question was about local aid. I want to hear, Don, who would you support? Who would you support as the next Senate president? I'm going to support Stan Rosenberg. Tell us who your candidate would be.
My candidate would be Senator Bruce Tarr, the Republican leader of the Senate. He and I have been friends for many years and have served back to the time when I worked for Senator Mike Knappich as his chief of staff. And Bruce is the one who's been giving me a lot of guidance along the way, although I've had many conversations with Senator Rosenberg too. I value Stan's long service in the legislature and the record that he brings to everything from public safety to especially higher education. Senator Rosenberg's a friend, and I know that I'll have the opportunity to work close by with him, and we'll get along just fine.
Well, so much for bipartisanship. My candidate is Stan Rosenberg, because Stan Rosenberg's a Western Mass guy who lives within minutes of Holyoke, East Hampton, Westfield, and the hill towns. My colleague, my friend's candidate is Bruce Tarr from Gloucester, about 140 miles away. I doubt he even knows where Holyoke is, never mind Tolland, Granville, and the rest of the hill towns. I'm going to go with a local guy. Don, you should join me in that.
Mr. Humison, it's your question.
David, just for the record, Senator Tarr was at my campaign kickoff at the warehouse in downtown Holyoke just a couple of weeks ago. I'm going to get back to the question I asked before about legislation that you'd be interested in filing because you didn't answer it. So when you become a senator, if you're lucky enough to have the vote of the people watching this today, what legislation might you file?
Well, I guess there's a dearth of questions on that side. So when we talk, and I'll happily re-explain myself because I answered it the first time. Changing the local aid formula, sir. But there'll be a record of accomplishment after I'm elected to the state senate, as opposed to a record of empty promises, failed promises. Don Humison's been sitting on the back bench in the State House for 11 and a half years, playing with his BlackBerry, once in a while looking up to see what's happening with debate, but constantly answering no. Dr. No maybe should be his nickname. When I'm elected to the state senate with your support, we're going to change those local aid formulas, and we're going to make sure we get the revenue back to Western Mass where it belongs. That's the legislation I intend to file. So if we look at the formulas, and if we look at the attributes that are apparent in Western Mass, I know we can get those legislators to agree with me and to help us in Western Massachusetts.
Mr. Humison, your rebuttal.
David, with all due respect, it's your party that controls the House, the Senate, and the governor's office. It's your party that controls the bad local aid formula as it is. I doubt that your support will help change it in any way that our support hasn't already done so. But I'll answer the question that I asked. When I get to Boston, I intend to file 2 pieces of legislation. The first will be a supplemental budget to pay for the cost of this special election for our cities and towns. And the second will be to support a bill filed by Representative Mike Kane and Senator Knappich, making volleyball the official team sport of the Commonwealth.
Mr. Bartley, your question.
Okay, so volleyball and the elections. Well, first of all, the elections are already paid for, but the Secretary of Commonwealth has already done that. And so volleyball, that's important to everybody around the district. Specific cuts, sir. Tell us about specific cuts that you intend to make. You know, your analysis of the budget. You've been there for 11 and a half years. Surely there must be something specific you can offer to the voters to trim down the size of the $34 billion budget.
Absolutely. And I'm sorry, Laura, I was waiting for you to say go.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
You know, as a member of the minority party, we haven't always been in a position where we've been in control of the budget process. The corner office, the House, the Senate are controlled in Boston by Democrats, folks that my colleague and friend want to join. Unfortunately, it's those folks that control that process, and those folks, quite frankly, that have controlled the blossoming, blooming expansion of our state budget over the years. In some years, I voted for that budget when I thought it was good for us here in Western Mass. Other years, I voted against it. But I've always looked out for the causes that were important to us here: higher education, transportation, public safety, veteran services. Now, to get to your answer, the areas of the budget that I've always looked to try to trim are those areas that are wasteful in their spending. And you and I have talked about it on this campaign trail. EBT fraud, abuse in our public housing system, anywhere there was money being spent to go to people that didn't necessarily earn it. Those are the areas I've looked to cut.
Mr. Bartley, your rebuttal.
What an answer that is. Attack the poor, directly attack the poor, right out of the Tea Party playbook. That's talk about a standard operating procedure. Well, I've looked at the budget, and if you look at just the independent section of the budget, $3.5 billion, you can see where there's ways to consolidate, there's ways to cut off all the attorneys out of the budget. There's plenty of opportunities for that. You, sir, should be able to answer those directly as opposed to a non-answer that you just gave.
Okay, very good. And I am going to take a break there. We have reached the halfway point of today's debate. We're going to take a short break now and pick up where we left off when we return. Stay with us. You're watching a very special Decision 2013 edition of 22 News in Focus. Welcome back to a special 22 News in Focus today. Today we are hearing from the candidates for State Senate left vacant by Mike Knappich in the 2nd Hamden, Hampshire District. We have Democrat David Bartley here with us, and we have Republican Don Humison. When we left off, Mr. Bartley asked the question, so Don, it's your question now.
Good. My next question is about legislative caucuses. Groups of legislators that get together to support different things across the state, irrespective of their committee assignment. So, for example, I belong to the Library Legislative Caucus and the Small Business Caucus, the Manufacturing Caucus, areas that are important to us here in Western Mass. My question's easy, and I'm just going to ask you, what caucuses would you seek to join as a state senator?
So again, that gets us a little bit past, and I know it's a lighthearted question, and I appreciate it. And,
it's nice to have those, right?
So every once in a while, you want to sort of lighten up and talk about it, but it's a little presumptuous. And so folks have, and Don tonight has asked me the same question: what committees do I want to be on? What legislative caucus do I want to be on? I want to be elected to be your state senator, and I'm going to again ask you humbly for your consideration at the polls on November 5th. I think I have the values, the beliefs, the education, the experience that you deserve to represent you in Boston as your state senator. So as far as the legislative caucus is concerned, or a committee, it's going to be the one or ones that best represent you, and the ones that I'm going to have the best ability to bring back the bacon to Western Mass where we need it.
Mr. Humison, your rebuttal.
Folks, debates are about getting to know the candidates, and so I ask these questions just so you get a chance to know me and my opponent a little bit better. There's no trick involved. I just want to know what caucuses you're interested in. Over the 11 years I've served, I've been on many committees and many caucuses, and probably the one I'm most proud of is one that I helped create, the Aviation Caucus. And with Barnes Airport and Westover here in Western Massachusetts, that Aviation Caucus has been very important to help protect those interests, bring jobs to Western Mass, and keep aviation viable in Massachusetts. Thank you.
Mr. Bartley, your question.
And that was a lighthearted question, and I'm going to try to ask a somewhat little harder question, but not too hard. Bipartisanship. We've seen what's happened in D.C. with the Tea Party Republicans trying to destroy our government, trying to destroy our way of life. Don, you've been in the State House for 11 and a half years. You've talked about your caucuses. You've talked about your friends you made there. Tell us a little bit about your track record of bipartisanship. I know, for example, I asked if you're going to vote for Stan Rosenberg. You said no, but tell us about a bipartisanship issue which you can point to.
Great question. And in fact, as a Republican in the Massachusetts legislature, you better be bipartisan simply by the fact that you're in the minority. So you're going to be working with Democrats and some independents, not many, mainly Democrats, on the other side of the aisle on every single issue that you're on, every committee, every caucus, every bill that you come up against. So there have been many. And I'll go right back to the example that I gave in the previous question about the Aviation Caucus. It was created by myself, a Republican, and Steve LeDuc from Marlborough, a Democrat, because we both represented airports in our district and both felt it was important to join together his experience as a Democrat, mine as a Republican, but both of our experience as people who represented airports and aviation-related businesses. That's one of many, many examples, but it's probably one that I'm most proud of, because this caucus now has 75 members out of the 200 in the legislature, and we've been very successful in supporting aviation and aviation jobs here in Western Massachusetts and across the state.
Mr. Bartley, your
And
rebuttal.
bipartisanship is important to me. So one of the things that my honorable friend didn't point to is a bipartisan piece of legislation that he's helped pass. Caucuses are great, and getting to know your fellow state reps and state senators is great, but there's got to be some kind of a weight to this. We're down in Boston to do the people's work, not to sit on a bunch of committees and make a bunch of pals down there. We want to do the people's work because we need help in Western Mass. That's what I intend to do.
Mr. Humison, it's your question.
A big part of the job, and I continually go back to my experience as a legislator, but a big part of this job is helping our constituents, helping the people that contact our offices or visit us at our offices or grocery stores or wherever we may be to ask us about problems they're having with state government, problems at the registry or problems with Fastlane, problems at the Department of Revenue. My contacts that I've built over the years, in the 11 years I've been a rep and the 9 years I worked with Mike Knappich, have helped me to answer those questions. So I guess, David, not having that experience in Boston, how do you think you'll have the contacts to help our constituents when they need it?
Again, Don just wants to keep asking easy questions, and I appreciate that. So, contacts in Boston, geez. There used to be this guy, used to be a Speaker of the House. His name was David M. Bartley, Speaker of the House from 1969 to 1975. He also is president of HCC for 28 years, and he's had a lifetime of public service. I think I might be able to tap into my dad's Rolodex and meet some contacts. But I'm more interested, not so much in contacts in Boston. I'm much more interested in talking to the mayors. Like, we just met with the Mayor Knappich of Westfield. $4 million cut from local aid since 2010, and that's directly from Mayor Knappich. What a disaster. I'm much more interested in hearing from the school committee people, the select board people, the city councilors. I'm a lot more interested in making those kind of contacts. I'm going to be available, and you can bank on it. I'm going to be available, and you're going to see a lot of me if I'm elected to the state Senate.
Mr. Humison, it's your rebuttal.
I'll remind you again that local aid is controlled by the majority party in the legislature, by your party. And so if there have been cuts made, and there have, unfortunately, a lot of the responsibility belongs at the feet of that party, your party, not mine. I go back again to my experience in the legislature and the fact that I've been able to meet people, Democrats and Republicans, private sector and public sector, and those people will help me do the job of helping our constituents when they call my office.
Mr. Bartley, it's your question.
I thought the question was about contacts, not local aid, but I've talked enough about local aid. Let's talk about Don's alma mater. Let's talk about what an important, pivotal part of Western Mass, Westfield State University. Don, I've called for Mr. Friedland, I've called for him to return those dollars to Westfield State University. But I'm just a candidate. What have you done as a state representative, an elected official, to get those dollars that he's holding hostage back to Westfield to help the students and the educators?
Well, I'm very proud of my degree from Westfield State University, as I said, and very proud of the fact that I'm still very involved in the Alumni Association and the foundation there at the college. At the same time, I'm very disappointed by the actions of President Dobell and the fact that this attention has been drawn to our university. You and I both said in a previous debate that there is a process in place, that investigations are undergoing, and that President Dobell deserves due process. As that due process plays out, I am confident that the Commonwealth of Massachusetts will be more than supportive to my alma mater and to this jewel of public education in Western Massachusetts. And so I'm just going to give the president his chance and the college its opportunity to rebuild.
Mr. Bartley.
Well, the question was about the $2 million being held hostage. So I'm not confident at all in Mr. Friedland, and I'm disappointed in his actions. I'm not going to make any grandiose statement that I'm going to go down and bang his door in, but I'll tell you what, he's going to hear from me, and he's going to hear from the constituents that I hope to represent, that how vital those dollars are. And if we don't get action out of him, then we're going to go straight to the corner office. And again, there are Democrats in charge, I get it, but these folks have to hear from us as people, just as folks in Western Mass. They'll listen to our voices.
Okay, I want to thank you both so much. We've reached the end of the question-answer portion of this debate. We're going to move forward now to closing statements. By way of drawing, Mr. Humison is going to start us off. Don, you have 1 minute.
Great. Well, thank you, Laura. Thank you, Dave, for this spirited debate. It was kind of invigorating. I appreciate it. Thank you, all of you who are watching today. I really just appreciate the chance to come before you as a candidate for State Senate and to ask for your vote. It's no mistake. I've been making my experience in the State House and in this district over the past 11 years a cornerstone of my campaign. And so that is why I constantly go back to the fact that the 11 years I've served in the House and the 9 years I served with Senator Knappich as his aide in the House and Senate will serve me best to pick up where Mike Knappich left off. And we're in the middle of the fiscal year, in the middle of a legislative session. As we've talked today, there are very important issues going on all around us in each of the 11 cities and towns of our district. I would think it'd be best to elect someone who can hit the ground running, someone who doesn't need time to ramp up. My opponent and I are friends. It may not always sound like it, but we are. And so I'm pleased with the tone of this debate. I really appreciate the fact that we've had such a good race. I think it's a nice way for other people to look at politics and say, every race should be the way the Humison-Bartley race was. Thank you for your time, and I appreciate your vote.
Mr. Bartley.
And thank you to TV22, thank you to all the viewers at home, and thank you to my friend Don Humison. We'll just change it, we'll say it to Bartley Humison. And, but I respectfully ask for your vote November 5th. And I do that because I believe I have the best ability to offer to Boston your values, your beliefs. My experience has been this: 17 years as a governmental auditor. I know where the waste, fraud, and abuse is in the budget. I'm a practicing attorney, but I didn't become an attorney as a young man. I became it as an attorney just 8 years ago. And it's been an experience. So I went to night school, but I'm also a public education guy. and I support public education, but more importantly, I support Western Massachusetts and its values. And to my good friend Don Humison, I thank him for his vigorous debate. We know what an important choice that you have. Again, I ask for your vote November 5th, and I really thank you for your consideration.
Okay, I want to thank you both, and that concludes our debate today. We want to thank both of our candidates for joining us. Thank you at home for watching. Be sure to head to the polls Tuesday, November 5th. Next, we're going to talk about Mohegan Sun's casino proposal in Palmer. Stay with us. You're watching 22 News in Focus.